Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I am doing 26 books to read in 2026. The vast majority of these books I do not really deeply anticipate reading. I did not choose them because I really want to read them, but instead I simply have them on my shelf. The vast majority of them are unsigned, and so I kind of want to read these books so that I could get rid of them and clear space on my shelf for other books. Most of these books are off the top 1000 list, 1000 Books to Read Before You Die by James Mustick. And my expectation for most of these books is I'm not really like super thinking any of them are going to be like 5-star reads or my favorite books of all time. Most of them I'm kind of reading just thinking, well, we'll see how it goes. I am a notoriously critical reader. I don't like a lot of what I read, so for this reason, I am not actually grouping these books into anticipated star ratings. Because if I were to do that, I would have to give a lot of books that would really be like 3 or 4-star predicted reads, 5-star projected reads, and then I'd have to give books that I'd anticipate really giving like 2 or 3 stars. I'd have to rank them like 4-star anticipated reads, and it would just kind of cascade from there, and it'd be a mess. And basically all of my expectations would, be underwhelming. So for that reason, I am not giving these books anticipated star ratings, but I did group them in order of my least anticipated read to my most anticipated read. So again, I'm not really sure how this reading year will be for me for these books, 26 books to read in 2026, because of them, really none of them are like, ooh, I can't wait to read that book. I'm so excited. I think this is going to be one of my favorite books ever. Mostly, I just selected these books because I have copies of them and they are unsigned. So once I finish reading them, I could get rid of them. So let's get into it, beginning with least anticipated read, Ernest Hemingway, In Our Time. Now, I have actually started to read this book, and I have read a couple other, or tried to read a couple other books by Ernest Hemingway. A Farewell to Arms, which was my first try by him. I really didn't like it at all, except I thought the first chapter of that book did uniquely read like a book that is written to be read aloud. So I actually read that first chapter aloud just because it felt like that's the way it's written, like this is written to be read aloud. And I kind of liked that. I thought it was very unique. I've never really read a book like that where I felt like necessary to read it aloud. But still, I didn't really like the book all that much. And then I tried reading The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, which is another of his books on the top 1000 list. And that one I liked even less than A Farewell to Arms. I just don't remember anything about it. It just did nothing for me. So as a result, Hemingway is kind of an author I do not like. I'm kind of thinking, he seems to me like he's grossly overrated. And I've talked with the owner of the bookstore. I call him the owner, even though now his son owns the bookstore, but I just call him the owner of the bookstore. I've talked with the owner of the bookstore about Ernest Hemingway a bit, and something he said that I think is pretty interesting is that he says that within the next 25 years or so, he thinks Ernest Hemingway will largely be forgotten. And the reason he says is because college courses are no longer assigning Ernest Hemingway books as like required reading. And what that will do, he says, is that will take Ernest Hemingway out of the canon. And what that means is if you are not being taught in college, what happens is, teachers and stuff who go through college will graduate and then they'll go on to become teachers themselves, but because they were not assigned to read Ernest Hemingway in college, they will not assign their students in high school or whatever to read Hemingway either. So as a result, Hemingway just won't be read anymore. People won't read him. They won't read him in schools. And the reason he says they're doing this is because there's quite a backlash against Hemingway for the way he presented his female characters. I'm not sure about this exactly, but I think either one, he like lacked female characters entirely. It was more male-oriented stories. If he did have female characters though, they were either just like really bland, standard, like stay-at-home wife stuff where really the woman doesn't have any real purpose, just except to please the man or whatever, to be a wife, to be a homemaker. Or he would have his female characters be really like gruff and tough, like they would chew tobacco and I don't know what else. But yeah, they would just be really like on the other side where they're really, I don't want to say like masculine necessarily, but just that type of character, like chewing tobacco and whatever. I don't know, maybe he had them be alcoholics or whatever. I do not know. But yeah, so as a result, Hemingway did not really have female characters that would appeal to current readers because, you know, current readers want to have such strong female characters or whatever. And so, yeah, they don't like the way Hemingway presents his female characters. So as a result, they're not teaching him in college courses anymore. They're not assigning Ernest Hemingway in class. So as a result, Hemingway will kind of be forgotten in the next 25 years or so because no one's going to read him anymore. No one's going to assign him as required reading in schools. So it's kind of weird to think that Hemingway in the next 25 years or so could be largely forgotten. Because if you were to ask me, like, who is the, like, I don't want to say greatest American author, but just like who would be the father of American literature, it would be a strong contender that it would be Ernest Hemingway. I mean, you could say it could be any number of people like Herman Melville or I don't know who. Mark Twain would be another strong contender. You could say like Harper Lee. But Hemingway would definitely be in that category where he's just one of the great American writers. And so it's just weird to think in the next 25, 50 years or so, he could largely be forgotten. So anyway, I have actually started to read this. I've read the first three. I thought they were the first three chapters, but then I went and looked up the book because I was kind of wondering, like, what is this book about? Like, who is the protagonist of this book? Because I wasn't quite getting that. And then I discovered this is actually a collection of short stories. So yeah, I was reading the book just thinking it was a novella, but instead it's just a collection of short stories. So that's why the chapters didn't seem like they made sense. Like, what does this chapter have to do with the last chapter? But anyway, kind of my thought reading the chapters, or the stories, I should say. Even though I did have that same thinking that, you know, I don't think this is really good, you know, for being Ernest Hemingway, you'd think this should be better written than it is. So from that standpoint, I was like, you know, this isn't very good. But at the same time, I was also thinking, you know, it's not bad either. I mean, yeah, I don't really like it, but it's not like, oh, this sucks, this is terrible. It's just like, well, it is what it is. And another thing is I do not like short stories. So you'd think this would be a recipe for disaster for me. A book of short stories, which I do not like, by Ernest Hemingway, who I do not like. But having read the first three short stories, my impression was kind of like, well, you know, they were okay. They were sufferable. They weren't insufferable. So since the book is only about 150 pages, I don't know how many short stories that is, like 20 or so. You know, I already read 3 on the first day, so it's like, you know, I could potentially finish this. And it would actually be my first Hemingway book that I read to completion. So yeah, that's kind of my thought, is I'll just chip away at it every couple weeks or so, read a few stories, and then eventually finish. And yeah, so far, not completely terrible, which is a lot for me to say about Hemingway and a book of short stories. That's like a mark of progress, like, hey, at least they're not completely terrible. Next is Milan Kundera, The Book of Laughter and Forgetting. I really do not know anything about this whatsoever, not the book or the author, although I have seen a lot of Milan Kundera books at the bookstore. So yeah, I do not know anything about it whatsoever. I'm pretty pessimistic about it. I don't know why. It just doesn't look like a book that interests me. And yeah, so really low expectations on this one. I'm expecting not to like it at all. But at the same time, those are sometimes the books that can really just come out of nowhere and make me think like, oh my God, this is a masterpiece. But will I think that for this one? Probably not. That's why I'm anticipating it as my second least anticipated read of the year. And again, unless I say otherwise, unless I forget, all of these books are on the top 1000 list by James Mustick. Next is Memoirs of Hadrian by, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to pronounce this name, Marguerite Yourcenar. My dad got this book for me when I was about to go under surgery for a hernia. So he bought this book for me kind of thinking I could read it during my recovery, but I never got around to it. But anyway, thank you, Dad, for getting this for me. I do not, or I should say I did not know anything about this book, Memoirs of Hadrian, though, so I was kind of thinking, okay, is this nonfiction? Is this actually the Memoirs of Hadrian, the Roman Emperor? And I do not know very much at all about Hadrian. I know, like, he built the wall in, the United Kingdom or whatever, Hadrian's Wall between, like, England and Scotland, but that's really all I know about him. And so I was kind of thinking, if this is actually nonfiction, if this is historical, I might kind of like that because it's like, dude, an autobiography by a Roman emperor? That'd be kind of interesting. But I looked it up and this is actually a work of fiction, I believe. Like she wrote it as an autobiography by Hadrian, his memoirs, but it is a work of fiction. It is made up. So that makes it a work of historical fiction, and I have increasingly had a very hate relationship toward historical fiction. The thing is, I like history, so you'd think I'd like historical fiction, but I think what so many of these authors do is they pick the most boring aspects of all these people's lives and all these events in history. They pick the most boring parts of it and draw out a really boring story about these boring events, about the most boring part of these characters' lives. And it's just like, I do not care about all this random useless crap. So I think it should be really easy to take books about historical figures and just make them interesting. Like, I don't even know Hadrian. I mean, like I say, I just don't know much about him. But I bet if I looked at like Wikipedia, I could figure out like 3 or 4 like different book ideas to write about Hadrian, or I could write just like a large book about Hadrian, and it'd be a lot better than all this crap these historical fiction writers write, because like I say, they just write about the most boring events of these characters' lives when you should be able to make it interesting. Because like I say, I like history, and just tell history and it should be interesting. Like, the guy's family and whatever battles he fought, like whatever wars he fought, how he rose to become emperor or whatever. That should all be able to be interesting stuff, but instead they're just like, oh, let me figure out the most boring parts of their lives and make up boring things about their lives and draw out a real wordy novel. That's how I kind of think a lot of historical fiction writers write, and I just don't like it, because again, I just think I could write a better book about Hadrian. Like, just give me a year and I could write a better book about him. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm kind of pessimistic about it though, just because I'm thinking, this is probably going to be boring. Next is Time and Again by Jack Finney. Not much to say about this one at all because I do not know anything about this book or author whatsoever. So do not know a thing about it. The main concern is it's a really long book. It's just about 400 pages and pretty small font. So really pessimistic about it. It could potentially be my least favorite read of the year just because it's such a big, long book, kind of small font, and just do not care. So this book is really going to have to come out of nowhere to pull me in, to gain my attention and to become a book I actually like. So from the onset, I'm really not expecting to like this book. Next, this is an author I kind of want to read, and I don't know why so much, but it is Henri de Balzac. Lost Illusions. So there are, I think, 3 books by Balzac on the top 1000 list. There's this book, Lost Illusions. There's also, I believe, his book Pierre Goriot, which is kind of like considered his masterpiece, I think, largely considered his masterpiece. And then there's another one called The Wild Ass's Skin. So I looked it up, like, what is the best book by Balzac to start with, and it said that Pierre Goriot is kind of, or however to pronounce it, is kind of a little bit more of a difficult book. And then I think The Wild Ass's Skin was also kind of considered a difficult starting point for Balzac. But Lost Illusions is kind of considered a little bit of a softer intro to him. So yeah, I think I have a copy of Pierre Goriot or whatever it is somewhere here. But yeah, since it said online that Lost Illusions is a little bit better of a starting point for him, that's the book I plan to try first. So I really do not know anything about this author or what his writing style is like. So really do not know what I'm getting into here. Do not know if I'm going to like it or love it or hate it or just be completely like, you know, is ambivalent. Does that mean like happy or does that mean like careless? Anyway, the word I'm trying to think, like completely indifferent toward the book. That's what I'm trying to say. So we'll see how it goes. Lost Illusions by Henri de Balzac. Next, with another book I actually started to read. This is actually part of a trilogy, but the first book is Fifth Business by Robertson Davies. It's part of a trilogy. I think it's called the Deptford Trilogy. So there's Fifth Business, The Manticore, and, oh, what's that say? World of Wonders. So yeah, I do not know anything about the series, or I should say I did not know anything about the series. I started reading Fifth Business, and so far I'm actually liking it somewhat well, so it's a pretty decent start, I think. I do not know anything else to say about Davies. I just don't know him at all. I don't know his books. I don't know the author. Something that's interesting, though, is the bookstore owner said that he went to a book signing, I think, where Davies was signing books, and what happened was he signed for the bookstore owner and then he kind of like froze, and like someone next to Davies, like a security guy or something, just said like, we gotta go. So they got Davies up and took him away, and then the bookstore owner heard that like a couple days later, whatever, Davies died of a stroke. So yeah, like the bookstore owner, I think, said that he may have been like the last one Davies ever signed a book for, which is interesting. I'm pretty sure he said that was for Robertson Davies. But yeah, so do not know anything about it. The bookstore owner, though, says this is a great series. I just mentioned it to him the other day, and he's like, ooh, yes, great, great series. So I'm kind of pessimistic. Like, I'm expecting I won't like it, but since the bookstore owner likes it a lot, I'm going to try to like it. I'm going to try to give it a longer leash. So I started reading it, just the first 2 or 3 chapters, and it's okay so far. So we'll see how it goes. Next, not a top 1000 list, but I was in another town, and so I went into another bookstore, and like my policy is whenever I go to another bookstore, I always buy books. And I think I found one book I was interested in, but I wanted to buy another one, so I asked like the girl there, like, hey, what would you recommend I read, you know? And so she recommended this, and I'm kind of iffy on it, but yeah, mainly I just bought it because I wanted to buy another book from the bookstore, and this is what she recommended. And I knew of the author, of course, because he's been all over BookTube, but it is Amor Towles, The Lincoln Highway. Now, Towles is better known for his book A Gentleman in Moscow, which I think is like, without a doubt, probably his masterpiece or whatever. That's his most popular book. And I don't know exactly, but I think this book might have kind of gotten a poor reception, because at the bookstore, we have a ton of copies of this book. I mean, we probably have like 8 copies of this book, but then we only have like 1 copy at a time, if any, of A Gentleman in Moscow. So what that kind of tells you is that people hold on to their copies of A Gentleman in Moscow. They do not hold on to The Lincoln Highway. So maybe they try reading it and just decide early on, like, nope, I don't like this, and then they turn it into the bookstore. So yeah, we have a lot of copies of this book, which kind of tells me fans don't really like this book, so it's probably not a very good book. And another thing is, I do not read a lot of contemporary fiction, and when I say contemporary fiction, I mean pretty much any book written after like the 1970s. That's pretty much contemporary fiction for me. The main reason I don't read contemporary books is because I think a lot of them are just trash. So I try reading these books that are like, real popular on BookTube and stuff, and I think they're just utter trash. Like, these writers have no talent, and it's like, what do people see in these books? The writing sucks, the characters suck, the plot sucks, everything about these contemporary books suck, and it's just overrated crap. And like, what the hell are people seeing in all this crap? So for that reason, I just don't really read a bunch of contemporary fiction, even though I know that's probably the thing people are looking for on BookTube, are, more current books, not like classic novels or whatever. So I usually read classic literature or whatever, because another thing is, at least for those authors, they are all pretty much dead, or they're all well established authors, so a bad review is not going to hurt them. No one should be offended if I leave a bad review of one of these other books, because it's like, well, the author's dead, I'm not going to hurt any feelings. But, for current authors, it's like, these people are still alive. And so I kind of like that freedom of being able to leave an honest review without having to worry about hurting the author's feelings or whatever. Or also, I don't really read books by like new, like up and coming authors, because even though I would sympathize with them, I want to leave very honest reviews. So if I read a book and I just don't think it's very good, I don't want to leave a poor review of an up and coming author. I don't want to hurt any author's career. So pretty much all the books I read, they're either dead or they're like well established in their careers. So a poor review is not going to hurt them. So anyway, yeah, I just don't read a bunch of current contemporary books. So pretty pessimistic about this one, especially because I don't think it's had a very good reception. So I've actually considered buying A Gentleman in Moscow. I saw it at the bookstore yesterday, but I decided not to buy it because then, I'd have to read that book and this one would just have to sit on my shelf for longer. So the reason I say this is because if I do not like this book, I'm probably not going to read A Gentleman in Moscow. So yeah, this is kind of like Amor Towell's only chance for me. I just, like I say, I don't read much current fiction, so this is pretty much the only chance I'll give him. If I don't like it, I'm done with the author. I suppose I could try reading A Gentleman in Moscow, and if I don't like it, then I could just get rid of this book entirely without even reading it, just turn it into the bookstore. And it's like a new book. I bought it new from another bookstore, so, they'll definitely take it at the bookstore and we'll have yet another copy of The Lincoln Highway. So maybe I'll do that. Maybe I might get A Gentleman in Moscow and read it instead. And whether I like it or not, if I don't like it, then I'll just turn in this book to the bookstore. So anyway, yeah, we'll see which one I wind up reading, either The Lincoln Highway or I'll get A Gentleman in Moscow. It's only going to cost me like $5, so, maybe I should just go ahead and go for it, A Gentleman in Moscow. So anyway, we'll see. Next is Stephen Baxter, Vacuum Diagrams. Kind of two concerns with this one. First off, it's science fiction. I'm not much of a fan of science fiction. Next is the length. It is like 500 pages. Not too small a font. I mean, it's a little bit small, but not agonizingly small. And then also is kind of like secondary concerns or third concerns or whatever. I've never really heard of Stephen Baxter. I think we may have a couple others books by him at the bookstore. But then that title, Vacuum Diagrams, like what kind of title is that for a science fiction book? Like, and there's like some kind of a whale in outer or is that a whale or is that a shark? It looks more like a shark. Or is that supposed to be a spaceship? Or is it supposed to be a vacuum in space? And it's just like, what the hell is this? And then it says winner of the Philip K. Dick Award. I do not like Philip K. Dick. So I'm really not expecting to like this too much. I don't know anything about it. If I like would have been able to like see a movie about this and actually like the movie, maybe I'd be more interested in it. Or if I knew there was like a big movie about this book, you know, I may think like, okay, this book has obviously had a good reception. It's had a major movie hit made after it. So, you know, there's something about this book that's interesting. But I've just never heard of this book. So it's like, well, you know, really low expectations. Next is the Channingsville Incident by David Bradley. I do not know anything about this whatsoever. Obviously, just like the cover, there's a black guy, then looks like a Klansman in the background, something about black experience. So it's some kind of book about racism. So I don't really like that. I don't really like books that focus on racism because I just kind of don't see the point in it too much, because it's like, yeah, I get it. Slavery was bad. The KKK was bad. There were great, terrible civil rights violations and stuff. That's bad. Like, I acknowledge that. I get that point. So it's like, I don't want to say like, why write a book about it? Because I mean, I perfectly understand writing books about that kind of stuff. I write books about, you know, bad things, you know, to bring more awareness to it. So I do understand that. But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, why read it? I mean, I know I agree with the point. Like, I agree, slavery bad, KKK bad. So, I don't know. I just don't really like it. I don't like the focus about race. Really, the main book that comes to mind for me that I actually liked that's largely about race is The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. I liked that book a lot, even though the constant talk about race was tiresome to me. But I actually liked that book. So we'll see how this one goes. My hope for it is that it is actually like a work of history, where it's like a pure history book. I could be interested in that, but if this is again like a work of historical fiction, I may not like that. It rivals Toni Morrison. I've recently tried reading Toni Morrison's Beloved again, and I didn't like it. And then it also goes on to say something it's like the best since Ellison's Invisible Man. I actually tried also reading that book, Ellison's Invisible Man, recently, and again, I just didn't like it at all. So just quoting two other books that I did not like whatsoever, comparing it to two other books I did not like whatsoever. So that really makes me think, yeah, I'm probably not going to like this one at all. If it is more just like a pure history, I might like that because I like history. Or if the writing is especially good, I could get into it then. But yeah, so really pessimistic about it. Next is not a top 1000 book, but it's The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. The book on the top 1000 list by Hugo is Les Miserables, or however you pronounce it. I tried reading that book a few years ago, and my recollection was I actually really liked the first chapter, and after reading the first chapter I was like, ooh, this could be a masterpiece. But then I just remember like the next 4 chapters being utterly boring and losing interest. So really, The Hunchback of Notre Dame was the book I really wanted to read by Hugo, even though it's not on the top 1000 list. And probably the reason why I wanted to read it so much is because of the Disney cartoon, which is seriously one of the most underrated Disney cartoons ever. It's a great cartoon, even though it's a pretty dark show. And I guess what I'll say is it's actually, I think, not as dark as the novel, because I'll go ahead and say this is I went ahead and read the summary of this book because I did not really ever anticipate reading this book. And the reason is because I have heard that this book goes into extensive detail talking about the description of Notre Dame Cathedral. And I guess like this book is sort of Victor Hugo's love letter to Notre Dame Cathedral and like the architectural style of that period or whatever. So he's just going in great detail talking about everything about the cathedral because he's really wants to preserve the architectural design or whatever of the cathedral, so he really wants to highlight that. So that's kind of why I think he wrote this book. And so that's why I say I went ahead and read the summary, because I did not anticipate reading this, because it's like 300 pages, pretty small font, and overly descriptive about like every single cobblestone of the cathedral. It's just like boring. I don't want to read all that crap. So I just wanted to read the summary of the story to see how it compares with the cartoon. And this is a spoiler, so if you don't want to know that, go ahead and skip like 30 seconds. But something that happens in the cartoon, you know, like the main gypsy woman, you know, she's rescued in the end and Quasimodo takes her off and they have a happy ever after or something. I don't remember how the cartoon goes. But she lives in the end. But in the book, she does not live in the end. She is executed in the end. So yeah, pretty dark ending. So that's, you know, depressing to know that in advance. But yeah, I'm really curious to read it and just to see how it goes, I don't even want to say how it compares with the cartoon because I have not seen the cartoon in like 20 or 25 years. So I just don't really remember anything much about it. So yeah, I'm curious to read it. I'm kind of hopeful I'll like it, even though I'm really expecting not to because of the over description in the book. Next, another book I'm kind of also concerned about is The Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane. So this is a book that I actually sort of tried to read in high school. I remember, I forget if it was assigned to us or if I chose this book. I think I may have had to choose the book to do a book report. And I just remember reading like a half chapter or whatever and not liking it. And what I did, I went to give my book report and I didn't know anything about the book. So I think I just read like the summary of the book online or something. I don't even remember if I did that. And the English teacher said, "So what did you think about the character's initials?" And I was like, huh? Because I didn't read the book at all. And he's like, yeah, the initials are JC, the teacher said, just like Jesus Christ. So it's like a metaphor for Jesus Christ. And I was just like, oh, yeah, sure. Because I only read like a page of this book and was completely bored by it. So I'm pretty pessimistic about it in a way, even though it is a short book, and I actually see now it has pretty large font, so it looks like it'd be an actual easy read. So yeah, so it's kind of weird reading it now because it's like, you know, this book I tried reading in high school and try reading it now and see what I think now. Maybe I'll have the exact same thought. Like I'll just read a chapter and just think, oh my God, this sucks. This is boring. Or maybe I'll like it. Or maybe I'll just be indifferent about it. We'll see. Next is Miss Read, Village School. I guess Miss Read is the author's name. I always think that's like a character's name or something. It just sounds like such a phony name. So I don't know if it is the actual person's name, but I guess this is the first novel in the beloved Fairy series. Village School. So I really don't know anything about this whatsoever. I imagine it's kind of sort of a book for children, even though we have a bunch of these series books at the bookstore, but they're not actually in the children's section. They're actually in the literature section, which is kind of interesting to me a bit. I am kind of anticipating these books are like Anne of Green Gables without Anne of Green Gables, which seems weird because Anne of Green Gables is the best thing about Anne of Green Gables. So, what is this series about? Like, whatever, what's the feature of this series? So yeah, because of it, this is kind of a book where I'm not really like motivated to read it at all. Like I would never read this book otherwise, except it is on the top 1000 list. So that's the only reason I'd really try it. So in spite of that, this is probably a book where I feel very indifferent about it. That's kind of my new favorite word of the day, indifferent. I learned a new word today. So yeah, the other books I've been kind of pessimistic about, or maybe super cautiously hopeful. This is a book where it's just like, meh, I don't really care. So I'm not really expecting not to like it, and I'm not expecting to like it. It's just sort of something in the middle. Like, well, it is what it is. Sort of for the benefits, I guess, it's a pretty short-ish book. And then I also I like children's books a little bit more than other books. And I guess I should say the reason is because I kind of read children's books, not so much thinking, do I like this book? But more thinking like, is this a book I would recommend to any children if I ever had them, which at this point I don't think is ever going to happen, which is really sad. And if I think about it very much longer, I'll get really depressed. But yeah, that's kind of how I read children's books, just thinking, is this a book I would want my kids to read, or is this a book I would read to my kids? So because of it, a lot of children's books I think are like, yeah, I'd have no problem reading this to my kids or having my kids read this book to me, That's fine because I'd want to encourage my kids. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm getting sad. But yeah, that's kind of how I judge children's books. And again, I do not actually know if this is a children's book because it's placed in literature. So yeah, but I'm kind of expecting it to be just like that, Basically like Anne of Green Gables without Anne of Green Gables, or just like, another Charlotte's Web or another Roald Dahl or whoever else, I kind of like children's books a little bit. I'm a little bit more gracious in the rankings of children's books because again, I don't rank them in terms of like my personal enjoyment. They kind of go into a category unto themselves, children's books. Basically, they're not for me. They're for children. So do I think the books would be good for children or not? Next is The Death of Ivan Ilyich and Other Stories by Leo Tolstoy. So again, in high school, I tried reading War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, and I recall reading about 200 pages and liking it somewhat, even though I was overwhelmed with the vast amount of characters and switching back and forth between Russian and French characters. But I kind of liked it because even then I liked history. So it was kind of cool reading a book about, the War of 1812 or whatever, a book about Napoleon. So that again was also one of the earlier books I ever tried to read. So I kind of like Russian writers, and I've said this before, but I think Russian writers, their style is kind of similar to my own because Russian writers tend to have a lot of characters, and in the end, everyone dies or the main character dies, rendering everything in the book, everything leading up to then, rendering all of it useless, all of it pointless. Like whatever they are struggling to achieve in the book, it doesn't ultimately matter in the end because everyone dies or the protagonist dies. So it's kind of like, what was the point? We did all of that just for the character to die. And that's kind of how a lot of my books are. A lot of my books may have a lot of characters and like this intricate web of different characters and stuff. And in the end, everyone dies. And it's like, why did I read this whole book? It's just so sad and depressing in the end. Like, every story ends bad for all the characters. So Russian writers tend to write like that a lot. So I also write like that. So I sympathize a lot with Russian writers. I think kind of like at heart, I am a Russian writer. Like, I do not actually like most American or British authors. French authors I kind of like decently somewhat. German authors I haven't really read too much, except Walter Moors. He's my favorite author of all time. He's a German writer and illustrator. But yeah, Russian writers, they haven't really written any of my favorite books of all time, but I kind of like their books regardless. Like, I can't even really name all the Russian writers offhand that I've read, but I've read many of the prominent Russian writers, and I kind of like them. I kind of like Russian writers, just like I say, a lot of characters, and in the end, everyone dies. So deep down, I think I'm kind of a Russian writer at heart myself. So anyway, I did not know anything about this book whatsoever, and that title, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, I thought it'd just be a work of fiction. But then I actually found out at the bookstore we have several books by Ivan Ilyich. So I guess it was an actual historical figure. I don't know anything about who that person was. I think he might have been an Austrian or something like that. Thank you, babe. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to me, like, so is this a work of fiction or what? Thank you, baby. But yeah, Ivan Ilyich is apparently a historical figure, which I guess makes sense because Tolstoy also wrote War and Peace, which is really a historical novel about the War of 1812 and Napoleon and stuff. So yeah, I realize now he actually did write about historical characters and stuff. I wonder if I should like read up first on Wikipedia about Ivan Ilyich before reading this book, or if it would be okay if I read the book first, not knowing anything about Ivan Ilyich in real life. So if you've read this book before, if you could tell me in the comments, like, if it's okay if I read this book by itself without knowing anything about Ivan Ilyich, will I understand it fine? Or do you think it'd be better if I did read up on Ivan Ilyich on Wikipedia or whatever? Let me know, because I just do not know which one to do. I do kind of like going in blind to books, not knowing anything about them, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know anything about this person. If I did not see those books at the bookstore, I would have thought Ivan Ilyich would have been a completely fictional person. So yeah, if you've read this book, let me know. Should I look up Ivan Ilyich before reading this book, or could I just read this book fine without knowing anything about him and understand it fine? Let me know in the comments. I would appreciate that. Next is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and I'll be really impressed with myself if I pronounce that name right. Half of a Yellow Sun. So this is a book on the top 1000 list, and I went to the library years and years back and looking for books on the top 1000 list. They did not have this book, but they did have Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's book Americana at the library, so I actually read that book. I don't remember how much I read of it. I think I read around a third of it maybe, and my recollection of it, my impression of it was the author definitely had talent. I didn't like it too much, but I thought, hey, this is pretty decent. The writer has some talent that I can recognize, and Half of a Yellow Sun is more, the top 1000 books. So I was kind of thinking, Americana may not be as good a book by her. So Half a Yellow Sun is the one that, I was kind of anticipating reading. So I'm kind of hopeful that I might like it. So I have that kind of prior experience reading the author and realizing this author does at least have some talent. So yeah, I'm kind of hopeful I may like it. I'm hopeful this is a real good book, especially because it's on the top 1000 list. But at the same time, I have tried reading this author and it's just like, meh, so-so. But like I say, I did recognize she had talent, so we'll see how it goes. I don't know whether to say I'm optimistic about this book or pessimistic, but I would say I'm hopeful to like it. I want to like this book. So yeah. And I see my ring light over there is kind of flickering. So if you guys notice that in the video, I'm sorry. I may have to get a new ring light. We'll see. But anyway, next book. Not a top 1000 book. And I think this is the only signed book on this list. But it's Knight Errant by R. Garcia E. Robertson. So I've seen a lot of this author's books at the bookstore, but I just didn't know about him whatsoever. But I was kind of curious because I just kept seeing a lot of his books, and I guess kind of just his name, R. Garcia E. Robertson, you know, he sounds like some kind of, you know, Hispanic dude or whatever. And so I was kind of curious to read him. Talking about like different nationalities or whatever, American writers, British writers, French writers, Russian writers. I have not really liked really any of the Spanish authors that I've read that I can think about, like Julia Alvarez. I've tried her. Gosh, I can't even think of all the other authors. Gabriel Marquez. I swear there's several names right on the tip of my tongue. And I actually have like a signed book by the one I'm trying to think about. Maybe I'll just like post a text of it on the screen whenever I'm editing the video and can think about what that author's name is. So yeah, I've read or tried to read a lot of books by Spanish authors, but haven't really liked them. So I saw this author, R. Garcia E. Robertson, and I was like, oh, well, that looks like another prominent Spanish author. So, you know, maybe give that a try. And so I looked it up. Like, I checked the back flap of the book to read, like, just about the author. And it says, R. Garcia E. Robertson, blah, blah, blah. He lives in Mount Vernon, Washington. And so I was like, that's where I live. So I went to the owner, basically. I keep calling him the owner, even though, again, his son owns the store now. And I asked him, like, hey, have you ever heard of this guy, R. Garcia E. Robertson? Do you know of that guy? And he said, oh, yeah, he comes into the bookstore every now and then, even though he said he hasn't been into the store for a few years, I think. But yeah, he said he's been into the store occasionally. So I was kind of like, oh, I should read one of his books just in case he ever does come back into the store, you know, that I'll be able to have read something he wrote instead of just being like, oh, I've heard of you. I've seen your books on the shelf. You know, I could actually have some experience having read his books. I do think he is quite an older guy now, though. I don't know exactly how old, but I think he's like, you know, near 70s or 80s or something like that. So yeah, this book is apparently like his magnum opus or like his masterpiece book. I guess it's his most popular book. I think Knight Errant and a signed copy of that book. I might potentially get another copy of this book just so I could read it without worrying about damaging it. I don't know. I know we have several copies of this book. But at the same time, I am pretty delicate with signed books anyway, and it is a hardback book, so, you know, I'll be pretty careful with it. But yeah, I might potentially get a copy of it just to as a reading copy. What I'll probably do is I'll probably start reading the first couple chapters, and if I start to think like, oh my god, this is a masterpiece, then I might get another copy just so I could read it and not worry about destroying it. But yeah, otherwise, I might just start reading the book and just think, nah, it's okay. And this book is only like 20 bucks, so it's not a real expensive book or whatever. But yeah, so R. Garcia E. Robertson, Knight Errant. I think it's kind of a science fiction fantasy book, which I'm not really a fan of that genre. Oh, well, of course it's fantasy. You can see there's like a knight there riding a horse. So yeah. I am kind of hopeful to like it, though, just being a local author. So it's like, oh my gosh, this great author lives in the same town I do. That'd be cool. Or in the off chance this guy ever comes into the bookstore. I've told the bookstore owner, like, hey, if this guy comes into the store, you know, let me meet him. I'd like to meet another author. So yeah, anyway, glad to have it. We'll see how it goes. Next is The Darling by Russell Banks. This is not a signed book. A few years ago, I read Russell Banks's book, which I have right there, The Sweet Hereafter, a top 1000 book. That book came out of nowhere to be one of my favorite books of all time. Like, seriously, it's a strong contender for top 5 favorite books of all time. Just a beautiful book, just a work of art, just beautiful story. I love that book so much. The Sweet Hereafter. I'd never heard of Russell Banks or The Sweet Hereafter before reading that book, and I had like no expectations for it. But the first chapter, I was just like, oh my God, this is good. And just the whole book was just magnificent. So yeah, if you guys have watched my channel at all, you should know I am a pretty critical reader. I don't like most of what I read. So hopefully you guys will believe that when I actually tell you I find a book that's like, oh my God, this is great. You know, hopefully that should mean something, because I don't say that very often. A lot of people, they'll rate like every book 5 stars, and they'll really genuinely seem like they love everything they read. I am not that way. It takes a lot to impress me. So hopefully when I do read a book that, you know, does blow me away, hopefully you know that's genuine, you know? So I don't just leave positive reviews just, you know, for shits and giggles, you know, I mean it. So because of that book, The Sweet Hereafter, Russell Banks became a must-buy, must-read author. So I have bought every book that I see in the bookstore that's by Russell Banks. I think now at this point I have like 4 signed books by Russell Banks. So Affliction, I have a signed copy of that, I think. The Angel on the Roof, I have a signed copy of that, I believe. I'm like 99% sure. The Book of Jamaica, I have an unsigned copy, I believe. Cloud Splitter, I have a signed copy of that. Continental Drift, I do not know if I have that book. It sounds very familiar though. Rule of the Bone, I recently bought a signed copy of that. Rule of the Bone. And yeah, The Sweet Hereafter, I wish I had a signed copy of that book. Just such a masterpiece book. So anyway, The Darling by Russell Banks, an unsigned copy. So again, the reason I selected this book is because since it's unsigned, once I finish it, I could get rid of it, you know, assuming I don't like absolutely love it and want to keep it forever. You know, once I read it and finish it, I could get rid of it. Whereas with the signed books I have by him, like Rule of the Bone and The Angel on the Roof or whatever. So I want to keep those, but this one I could get rid of as soon as I try reading it. So I'm kind of pessimistic about this one because I've tried reading a couple other books by Russell Banks. I tried reading Affliction and I tried reading Cloud Splitter, and I didn't really like them at all. So far, The Sweet Hereafter is the only book I've actually liked by Russell Banks. So I'm kind of beginning to think a little bit more that Russell Banks was a one-hit wonder. He wrote one book that was phenomenal, The Sweet Hereafter, but all his other books, I'm still waiting to find another gem. I'm hoping with each book, you know, I read by him that it'll be like, ooh, yes, that book is even as good as The Sweet Hereafter, or even better. But they haven't been. They've all been disappointments, even though, again, there's only a couple of them, Affliction and Cloud Splitter. So yeah, The Darling, kind of pessimistic about it, but I'm hopeful it'll be a good book. Russell Banks, a must-buy, must-read author for me. So if you take away anything out of this, look for The Sweet Hereafter, either from the library or from a bookstore, or I would also recommend like buying it. Like if you can't find it in either one of those, buy it off Amazon. You know, I think it's such a good book. It's a must-read book. Even though, having said that, I'm kind of worried I raise expectations, because now you'll be thinking, oh, it's going to be one of the greatest books ever. And so if it's anything short of that, you'll be like, damn it, Sean let me down. He said this was a great book and it's not the greatest book ever. So yeah, you know, I didn't go into the book thinking, oh, this is going to be one of the greatest books ever. I just went in thinking, you know, oh, I'll probably try a couple chapters and see how it goes. But yeah, so that would be my wish. Like, buy or get The Sweet Hereafter, but don't think too much about it. Like, don't anticipate too much. So that way the book will, blow away your expectations or whatever. Anyway, the next book is not a top 1000 book, but it's Family Matters by Rohinton Mistry. So I've talked in previous videos. I've read Rohinton Mistry's book, A Fine Balance, which I have a signed copy of, which is real sweet. A Fine Balance is widely considered one of the 10 greatest books to ever come out of Asia. And so I got a signed copy of that. And so I was really hopeful to read it. And again, I've said this in several videos before, but my impression of Rohinton Mistry is basically he wrote like I do. So there's only one other author whose writing I think is very similar to my own, and that is Richard Wright, the author of Native Son. So us three, Rohinton Mistry, Richard Wright, and myself, I think we all write very similar to each other. We have the same kind of vocabulary, the same sentence structure. Our use of description is the same. Our use of dialogue is the same. Our pacing is the same. Just everything about how we write is similar to each other. It's like, we're clones of each other. We're brothers from different mothers. Myself, Rohinton Mistry, and Richard Wright, brothers from different mothers. So I previously last year tried reading Rohinton Mistry's first book, which was called, Such a Long Journey. That was his first novel. And I didn't like it whatsoever. There was just nothing about it that, appealed to me. And even the writing, it didn't seem like a book I would write. A Fine Balance was, however, like a book I would write. And so, yeah, my view of Rohinton Mistry really took a dive with Such a Long Journey. Because basically my problem with A Fine Balance is that it was kind of just too long, and I don't want to get into it too much, but I thought the characters were not good enough to keep me invested in the whole story. So Such a Long Journey was a shorter novel. So I was kind of hopeful I might like it more, because it's like, okay, a big problem with A Fine Balance is it was just too long. So I thought, okay, Such a Long Journey is shorter, I might like it more. But I actually liked it less than A Fine Balance. So Family Matters is a bit bigger of a book, which, like I say, is kind of a concern. It's like, oh, it's a bigger book, I may not like it. But what I kind of realized is that this is a book he wrote after A Fine Balance. So my reasoning is that he should have leveled up as a writer. I believe each writer's or each artist's work should be better than their previous work, because you're more experienced, you have more skills than you did for your last work of art or your last book or whatever. Your skills are improving, or they should improve. So since this is Rohinton Mistry's third novel, and it's actually his most recent novel, I think he published it in 2003, and he has not published any novels since then. And I really wonder why, because he's still alive, I'm pretty sure. I think he's somewhere near his 70s or something, but I think he lives up in Canada. And yeah, he hasn't published any novels since this one, I think in 2003. So it's like, why haven't you been publishing novels, Rohinton Mistry? What's the dealio, As a brother from another mother, I care about the dude, It's like, come on, buddy, I'm rooting for you. I want you to write more novels. I want you to write more good books. So why haven't you published any novels? Why is this your most recent one? So yeah, what I was trying to say is that, since this book, he wrote it after A Fine Balance, hopefully he is actually a better writer for this book. The flaws he had with A Fine Balance, with the length and with some of the characterization and stuff and the plot, hopefully this book, he can, get rid of those mistakes and write a better book. So because of it, I'm hopeful to like this. But at the same time, having tried to read and being disappointed by Such a Long Journey, I'm kind of thinking, oh, I don't really like Rohinton Mistry as much anymore. But I'm hopeful this is actually going to be a better book. If not better than A Fine Balance, at least better than Such a Long Journey. Next, not too much to say about this one, but it's Orhan Pamuk, Snow. So this is not a book on the top 1000 list. Nothing Orhan Pamuk wrote is on the top 1000 list. And I think the way I found out about this guy, I think I've seen several of his books at the bookstore, but I was probably on Wikipedia just doing research or whatever for one of my books set in Turkey. And I probably read somewhere that Turkey has an author named Orhan Pamuk who is kind of like sort of considered their greatest writer. And Snow, the bookstore owner says, is kind of his magnum opus, you know, his greatest book. So I got a copy of it. And anyway, Orhan Pamuk is kind of like a is it person non grata or something? He's sort of like public enemy number one because I think Orhan Pamuk has like acknowledged the Armenian genocide where, you know, Turkey and the Ottoman Turks killed like, I think it was something like 1.5 million Armenians or something like that. I'm sorry that I don't know the exact number offhand. But Turkey kind of denies they did that, or they deny that it was a genocide and all that. And Orhan Pamuk has said, like, you know, yeah, we did it. It's a terrible thing. And so Turkey really does not like this dude. And I think for a time there were like threats on his life. But then Turkey kind of decided, like, you know, this is our most famous author. We would look like shit if we, like, did anything bad to this guy. So they've kind of like reluctantly let the guy back into Turkey. I think if he left, I think he went to the United States for a while, but I think he went back to Turkey. Maybe I'm confusing him with Solzhenitsyn or whatever. But yeah, so he's kind of Turkey's most famous author, and you know, they don't really like the things he has said in the past, but at the same time, they would look really bad if they did anything against him. So I kind of sympathize with him from that standpoint. Like another author that comes to mind is Salman Rushdie, because Salman Rushdie wrote several books that actually got a kill order put out on him by Iran, and recently there was a stabbing attack against him, Salman Rushdie. So I kind of sympathize with these guys because it's like they've offended entire countries or entire religions because of their comments or because of their books, and I kind of sympathize with that because, like, how do I say it? It's kind of like I'm trying to do the same thing with my books. Like, I thought my books would do the same thing by now, like German Derelict with Iran, Egyptian Demise with Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood, Syrian Dander with Syria and with ISIS and Russia a little bit, Ottoman Destiny, my next book set in Turkey. That's really kind of a middle finger to Erdogan. So again, Turkey. My next book after that would be Saudi Arabia, so I could piss off the Saudi Arabian royal family and so on. So then I also have a book upcoming about Israel. So that one, you know, I could piss off the Jews or the pro-Hamas people or the pro-Gaza people. I could piss them off. So it's kind of like, you know, get in line. Like, who do I offend first who, you know, takes action to kill me? It's kind of like, who will it be? The Iranians, the Egyptians, ISIS, you know, American liberals? Who will I offend first? So yeah, Orhan Pamuk, I don't really know anything about it whatsoever. I'm a little bit iffy because it is quite a bigger book, but I want to like it because of the author. I kind of like that, you know, he said some controversial stuff, so I respect that. And also the fact that Turkey doesn't really like this guy. I love that. That's a major plus for me. If Turkey doesn't like you, I like you. Next is Mutiny on the Bounty by Charles Nordhoff and James Norman Hall. I don't really have much to say about this one, but it's a real famous nautical book, and I kind of like nautical books. I've read several of them. My favorite is The Sea Wolf by Jack London. and this kind of ties in. The main problem with these stories, these nautical books, and again, my ring light is kind of flickering, so if you see that, I apologize. My main problem with nautical stories is a lot of the authors really get bogged down in description about like, oh, this rope and this line and this mast and this deck. They just get swamped with those details, and it just gets boring. Like, oh my god, just talking about all these masts and ropes and lines and tows and, you know, decks and whatever. It's just boring. But I kind of like nautical books a little bit. I like the idea of nautical books, I guess. I think part of the reason I like it is because it has usually kind of like a limited setting. It all takes place usually on one ship. So it's like you can't go anywhere. Even though you may be going around the world, you're all contained. It's all the same characters, all in the same place. And then you see the different relationship dynamics take place and how events, you know, divide the crew and all that. So I think it's really a good, how do I say, setting for stories, I guess, and just, you know, being able to have one precise location and all the characters are on that ship and how events affect all the characters and all that. So I kind of like it. And I just saw on the back of the book, I'm master of this ship now. So literally saying, look at me, I am the captain now. I am the captain now. Next, this is a book, oh, I don't know how to say for this one, for like optimistic or pessimistic or hopeful or whatever. It's all of those. But it is Soldier in the Rain by William Goldman. So William Goldman, I most know him as the author of The Princess Bride. And because of that, I love that book. I love The Princess Bride. Oh, and I guess this is probably the best time to say it. Just a few days ago, Rob Reiner was murdered, apparently. Rob Reiner and his wife. Rob Reiner, the director of Princess Bride. And he also did other things as well. Like I most know him from, you know, he also directed This Is Spinal Tap, another movie I really like. So yeah, really, you know, tragic event. Rob Reiner and his wife being killed. Tragic loss. And you know, politics. I do not like Rob Reiner's politics at all. I did not like his politics at all. And in fact, on Twitter, I used to troll him a lot because I would post like memes of The Princess Bride because Rob Reiner would post like pro gun control stuff, which I'm against, you know. And so I would post memes of Princess Bride, like saying, you know, you'd like to think that, wouldn't you? Or inconceivable or whatever. So I loved trolling Rob Reiner. And so, yeah, it's kind of a situation where it's kind of like a love-hate thing. Like I loved hating on the guy just because he was so like passionately for gun control. And so, you know, it was kind of fun for me to respond to him. I don't think he ever replied to me or anything, so that kind of sucks. But yeah, I think no matter someone's politics, it's a tragic thing that the guy and his wife were murdered, you know? Basically, what I'm getting at is, like, on Fox News and stuff, I was looking at like the posts in reaction to his murder, and literally like every other post was making light of it, joking about it, or saying, you know, they didn't like Rob Reiner or whatever, or just joking about it. And I think that's so disheartening. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago after Charlie Kirk's assassination, just how disheartening it was to see people like celebrating Charlie Kirk being murdered because they disagreed with him. It's like, how can you hate someone so much because of their politics that you would celebrate their being murdered? I mean, it's not even that they die randomly, like just as a heart attack or whatever. That would kind of be like, oh, too bad. Anyway, moving on. But for them to be murdered and for people to be like joking about it or even happy about it, I think that is just so disheartening. Like I have never disliked anyone so much that I have wanted them to come to harm. So yeah, that's really just disheartening to me, that to see it happening on you know, basically my side as well. You know, first I saw it with reactions to Charlie Kirk, and I was like, okay, that shows how heartless the other side is. And then after Rob Reiner, to see like every other person just making light of it. But there was a lot of people who were saying, you know, hey, I disagreed with his politics, but this sucks. You know, this is really tragic. I feel real bad. You know, my heart goes out to him, you know, all that. So there were definitely people responding positive. I mean, not positively, but empathetically, you know, hey, I didn't like the guy. I didn't like his politics. But yeah, it's tragic that he's murdered. That sucks. But then, like, every other one would be making light of it. And so that's just so disheartening to me, and I'm kind of crying over it. So yeah, really disheartening, really a blow. Rob Reiner, you know, I really like several of his movies, but that's really not what the main takeaway should be. It should not be like, oh, I liked The Princess Bride, I liked This Is Spinal Tap. The takeaway should be someone was murdered. That is wrong. It doesn't matter that, oh, I liked his movies. Someone was murdered. That's tragic. You know, forget about whether you like his movies or not. Forget about his politics. Someone was murdered. That's tragic. So really a sad thing. So yeah, I kind of need a moment to like recompose myself here. Give me a moment. Okay, so for William Goldman wrote The Princess Bride, and I don't think I mentioned he also wrote the screenplay for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Again, talking about William Goldman now. William Goldman also wrote several other things as well, like he wrote The Marathon Man, which also became a, I don't want to say a really popular movie because it's kind of a little bit forgotten now, but still, it's a popular movie, The Marathon Man. And so basically what I'm getting at is William Goldman did a lot of things. He wrote a lot of novels and screenplays, but for the most part, he's largely just remembered as the author of The Princess Bride. And so kind of as a writer, I wanted to give William Goldman credit he deserved. Like, he had a whole career. He had all these other novels and all these other screenplays. Another one I forgot to mention was he wrote the screenplay for the Stephen King film Misery, the film adaptation of Stephen King's book Misery. He wrote the screenplay to that, William Goldman. So he just wrote a lot of things. So I really wanted to give William Goldman credit for more of the works he's done. So because of it, William Goldman kind of became a must-buy, must-read author. So I bought every book of his that I've seen at the bookstore. And so last year, I decided to read his book Magic because as a kid, the film Magic terrified me. Basically, the film Magic and the book as well, it's about this ventriloquist dummy guy, this guy who controls this ventriloquist dummy, and murders begin happening. And so the book and the film is kind of wondering, like, is the dummy doing the murders or is the guy himself doing the murders? And I saw that movie once when I was like 10 or 11 years old as a kid, and it creeped the hell out of me. I hated that movie. It's like the scariest movie I'd ever seen. So last year I put it on my to-read list, and I loved the book Magic. And then I bought a copy of the movie, a Blu-ray of it, and it stars Anthony Hopkins from Silence of the Lambs fame, Hannibal Lecter, Anthony Hopkins. And it was actually quite funny watching the film Magic now, just because there were parts where I was literally laughing out loud because it was so unintentionally funny, that film. So yeah, and it does follow the book very closely. William Goldman also wrote the screenplay for the film Magic. So he wrote the novel and he wrote the screenplay, and the film very closely follows the book. And I liked it a lot. And kind of my impression going in before reading Magic is that, okay, I'm not going to like this as much. I understand William Goldman wrote The Princess Bride, but all of his books were not like The Princess Bride. All of his books were different books, you know? So Magic, I was like, okay, this is going to be a darker book. This probably won't be as good. It definitely won't be as good as The Princess Bride. But I actually liked it a lot, the book. So because of that, that kind of raises expectations even higher, because it's like, okay, I read The Princess Bride and I loved it. I read Magic And I pretty much loved that book as well. So now it's kind of like, ooh, I'm kind of expecting now every William Goldman book, I will love it. And, I'm just expecting eventually I'll run into books where it's like, ooh, I don't like that book at all. So I'm really terrified to read it, just thinking like, oh, I hope I don't dislike this book. Is that the right wording? I hope I don't dislike it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is I am like forgetting my words here. I'm like getting so confused. Like, how do words work again? I'll just say it this way. I'm hoping I like Soldier in the Rain. So I don't really know anything about it. I did look it up because it says something, I think it says something about there's a movie about it. And I forget who the movie features. But it seems like it's an actor or something that I definitely know of. I kind of want to say Jackie Gleason, but I don't know if that's right. Anyway, again, I'll probably like put a font up somewhere saying which actor is in the film. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm really, like I say, I'm torn between being optimistic, pessimistic, and hopeful. I really want to like it though. Soldier in the Rain by William Goldman. And once again, just a real tragic thing about Rob Reiner. Real tragic news. And no matter what you think about someone's politics, you should never dislike them strongly enough where you actually take joy in their death, especially their being murdered. That is just so unhumane, basically. And yeah, how can you be in a civil society where people celebrate the death of other people, and not even like serial killers or whatever, not even like terrorists or whatever, just people you disagree with politically? That's no reason to celebrate someone's death. If it's a serial killer or if it's like Bin Laden or something, that's one thing. But like Rob Reiner or Charlie Kirk, it's like, what the hell is wrong with our people when we dislike people so much because of their politics that we celebrate and make light of their being murdered? That is just so wrong. That is such a bad sign for our society when half the country wants the other half to die. You cannot have a free, open society where half of your people want the other half to die. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Next is also not a top 1000 book. I don't know if I mentioned, but Soldier in the Rain by William Goldman was not a top 1000 book either. Next, not a top 1000 book, but it's Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. And so I've mentioned previously, mainly in my video review of Spartacus, I am a big fan of the film Spartacus with Kirk Douglas, and I have a signed book by Kirk Douglas right down there. I don't know if you can see it. A signed copy of a book by Kirk Douglas, the guy who played Spartacus. I really like that movie. And anyway, Spartacus, the film, was based on a book, Spartacus, written by a guy named Howard Fast. And Howard Fast was blacklisted because of like his affiliation with a communist group, and Howard Fast actually served, I think, several months in a prison because he refused to testify to Congress, naming names about other people he knew who were in this like communist group or whatever. And so I talk about it in previous videos, but I am a big supporter of free speech and freedom of association. So I believe as Americans, you are entirely free to be a part of any group you want, like any political group or whatever. Like, you are completely free to be a communist or the other side. I don't want to say the other side because, it may get flagged or whatever. But yeah, I basically believe you can be a part of any group you want. You can espouse any political views you want, provided you do not threaten violence. So you cannot threaten to kill people or whatever. You can't threaten revolution or whatever. But if you want to be a communist or any other political group or whatever, if you want to promote any political viewpoint, provided you don't promote force or violence, you are entirely free to do that. And so what happened in like the 1950s, 1960s is there was a great anti-communist push in the United States, most famously with Joseph McCarthy, the senator. I want to say he was from Minnesota, but basically where it was kind of criminalized to become a communist. It was criminal to be a communist, sort of, I guess. I don't actually know like how far the laws actually went, but yeah, there was definitely like really fierce anti-communism sentiment. And so there was something at the time called blacklisting, which was basically if you were known or suspected of being a communist, they would blacklist you, which means they would like not give you jobs or anything. So most famously for like Hollywood and stuff, if you were blacklisted, if you were a writer or if you were an actor or director or whatever, being blacklisted meant you would not get jobs, you know? Basically, for today, we know that as cancel culture. So if you are, you know, an unpopular person, if you have an unpopular opinion, you know, people want to get you fired and all that. So it's cancel culture. It's basically the same thing. But back then, it was definitely more closer to being criminalized, where if you're a communist, you risked going to prison. And Howard Fast, who wrote Spartacus, the book Spartacus, actually went to prison because of his affiliation or whatever with communism. So anyway, the reason I'm talking about all of this is I wanted to say Charlie Kirk. Kirk Douglas, the actor from Spartacus, he decided like, hey, I don't care that Howard Fast, who wrote Spartacus, I don't care that he's blacklisted. I want to make a Spartacus movie. So what Kirk Douglas did is he decided like openly to say, yeah, I'm working on this film Spartacus written by Howard Fast. And so that was kind of like breaking the blacklist, because until then people wouldn't give jobs to people who were blacklisted. But Kirk Douglas said, screw that, I'm going to give him, you know, I'm going to do it anyway. And I really respect that. Like, no matter the politics, you know, I think that's fine. And I really respect Kirk Douglas for having that courage to go ahead and say, like, you know, basically, F you. It's a book written by Howard Fast, and I'm making a movie about it. So I really respect him for that. So what happened is Howard Fast wrote a screenplay of Spartacus for Kirk Douglas, but I guess Kirk Douglas didn't like Howard Fast's screenplay at all. Like, you could not make a movie based on the screenplay that Howard Fast wrote. I hope that makes sense. Howard Fast wrote the book, but then he also wrote a screenplay, and the screenplay, Kirk Douglas decided, you know, this is no good. We can't make the movie this way. So Kirk Douglas asked around and he said, like, hey, who can write a screenplay really quickly? Because we need it like within 2 weeks or whatever. And so they said, oh, Dalton Trumbo could do it. And Dalton Trumbo was also blacklisted. So they gave the script to him, and Dalton Trumbo rewrote it, and that pretty much gives us the Spartacus film that we now have. So it was both of those guys. Howard Fast wrote the novel and the first screenplay, and Dalton Trumbo did a treatment of the screenplay. So Dalton Trumbo was blacklisted as well. So just like how I read Howard Fast, because I wanted to kind of support Howard Fast, because I really am opposed to that whole blacklisting thing. I support freedom of association. I support people being a communist if that's what they want to believe. That's entirely their right. What they cannot do is threaten force or violence. But if they just want to be a communist, that's fine. I support that. Even though I don't like communism, I support people being communists if that's what they are, and being open about it and whatever. So yeah, so I read Howard Fast's book Spartacus, and I liked it pretty well. I guess I'll try putting it at the end of this video, so you guys could watch that if you want. But yeah, so I also want to read this book by Dalton Trumbo. The bookstore owner says this is a pretty good book. I kind of wish he didn't say that, because now it raises expectations a bit. So yeah, I really wanted to just read a book by Dalton Trumbo to support him for the whole blacklisting thing. Because again, Dalton Trumbo is pretty much a name that no one really knows nowadays. He's pretty much forgotten. So I'd like to be able to read the guy and, you know, hopefully if he wrote some good stuff, to promote it, to say, hey, check out this book by this guy, Dalton Trumbo. This is a really good book. I would like to do that. I'd like to support other authors, especially ones who I think got shafted, who got railroaded or whatever. So I don't know Dalton Trumbo's history. Like, I don't know if he went to jail or prison or anything, but I definitely know he was blacklisted. And I think he had to write like screenplays under different names. So like on the film, it would say like screenplay by whoever, by some false name. So yeah, I really want to give him the credit he deserves and to support, you know, the artist. Coming up on the end here, I kind of want to hurry because my legs are killing me. But next is 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. This is not on the top 1000 list. The top 1000 book is Childhood's End. I do have a copy of that book, but this is really the one I want to read because I've just never heard of Childhood's End, but I have heard of 2001: A Space Odyssey. I have never actually seen the film, so, you know, I want to try reading the book first and see how it goes. The way it happened is Arthur C. Clarke wrote basically the screenplay for the film 2001 while they were making it, and at the same time he was also writing the novelization of, you know, the whatever, the show. So yeah, they were all happening concurrently or whatever. He was writing the screenplay while they were making the film, and he was also writing the novel while they were making the film. So they were all doing it at once. So the book has several differences from the movie. Again, I have not seen the movie, so I want to read the book first and then presumably see the movie, because I know the movie is kind of considered one of the greatest movies of all time. So yeah. And something that also really boosts my interest in this is I actually have a signed copy of Arthur C. Clarke 2010 Odyssey 2, a signed copy. So this is kind of a book I never really expected to get, because Arthur C. Clarke is kind of considered part of the big three of science fiction, and oh man, already I'm kind of forgetting on the other two. One is Robert A. Heinlein, who you'll see in just a moment here. The other is, I always want to say it's Ray Bradbury, but it's not Ray Bradbury. Arthur C. Clarke, oh, it must be Isaac Asimov. Those must be the big three of science fiction. Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and Robert A. Heinlein, the big three of science fiction. Really excited to get a signed book by one of the big three, Arthur C. Clarke. It's just not anything I ever expected getting. And it's also pretty cool that even though it's not 2001, it's at least part of that series, 2010 Odyssey 2. So really a treasured autograph. I didn't really even have to pay all that much for it either. I got it pretty cheap, especially considering the author. So really excited about that. Definitely a treasured autograph. And it goes right up there. Next, I was just mentioning, is Robert A. Heinlein, Starship Troopers. So again, this is kind of the main book I wanted to read by Robert A. Heinlein. And I'm sorry I've kind of been putting like the books in front of my mouth. Hopefully it's not like making me sound muted. I need to quit doing that. So a couple years ago, I tried reading Heinlein's book, Stranger in a Strange Land, which is on the top 1000 list. I think it's his only book on the top 1000 list. And I'm really divided on that book. Nibbler. I'm divided on the book Stranger in a Strange Land. I liked parts of it very well, but other parts of it, I didn't like as much, and it was kind of long, but there were definitely parts of it I liked. But Starship Troopers is the main book I wanted to read by him. And if you're curious what I'm doing, I have my pinky out and Nibbler is nibbling on my pinky. Real gentle love bites. So I really love the film Starship Troopers. It was directed by, I think his name's Paul Verhoeven. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right at all, because Dutch names, I think he's Dutch. Dutch names pronunciations are all really weird. Like Paul Verhoeven, the actual pronunciation is probably like Paul Verhoeven, you know, whatever. Or Vincent van Gogh, like the actual Dutch pronunciation is like Vincent van Gogh. So yeah, I just can't do Dutch pronunciations. Like, what the hell are they thinking? Well, anyway, so Paul Verhoeven, he directed RoboCop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers. Something I love is that in an interview or whatever, Paul Verhoeven said that he tried reading Starship Troopers and he just got bored by it halfway through. He thought the book was just utterly boring, and so he just gave up halfway through and made the movie however he thought it should go, which I think is just pretty hilarious. Like, a lot of times for directors and stuff, they always say like, oh yeah, we want to be faithful to the original and whatever, we're being faithful to the original. And Verhoeven just came out and flat out said, yeah, I tried reading the book, but I got bored and just quit the book, so I just made the movie however I thought it should go. So I think that's hilarious. And I think he said the reason he didn't like it is because most of the book is just like lectures in the classroom. Okay, Nibbler, you're biting hard now. Lectures in the classroom about like discipline and stuff. Because I guess the reason Heinlein wrote this book is because it was like the 50s or 60s or whatever. So there was a great like anti-war movement in the United States and counterculturalism and stuff. And like the Beat Generation and hippies and all that, where, you know, kids and like young men and stuff were seen as really irresponsible. So Heinlein, I think, wrote this book really to promote the idea that, hey, what our youth need is more discipline. Like, our youth need to be like in the military. They need to be disciplined. They need to, you know, live upstanding lives. So I think that's what Heinlein was kind of emphasizing with this book. But Paul Verhoeven, for the film Starship Troopers, he chose to kind of satirize that, to spoof it, to show like, the way I like to say it, this is not original. I saw this on a comment somewhere for Starship Troopers, but someone said that Starship Troopers, the film, is a pre 9/11 spoof or satire of the reaction to September 11th. Basically, that film kind of satirizes like how we were after 9/11, but they made it before 9/11. So it's just really interesting from that standpoint, and I think that's kind of funny. And again, I like the film Starship Troopers a lot. So I'm really kind of excited to read this book, and I kind of want to see how bad it potentially is. Like, just, oh my God, this book is so boring. It's just lectures in the classroom about discipline. Oh my God, boring. If it's like that, I think that might actually make the book kind of alluring in a way. Like, oh my God, this book is so bad that it's good. That's kind of my hope. Or that the book is actually good. But we'll see how it goes. I love, though, that Paul Verhoeven just said, yeah, I tried to read the book. It was boring, so I just made the movie the way I thought it should go. That is hilarious. Next, and again, I just really want to zip through these, and I don't have much to say about them, but next is Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. Don't know anything to say about it. I was never really a big Winnie the Pooh fan as a kid, so I don't know like any of the characters or whatever. I think one of them may be called like Tigger or something, but I don't know anything about the series otherwise than that. I didn't even know it was based on a book. But like I say, I kind of like children's books. So yeah, really hopeful to read it. I'll probably like it pretty well, and it'll be pretty much everything, you know, I expect it to be. So I don't expect to have a problem with it. Next, pretty much in the same vein, is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. All of the same stuff, really, as I said about the last book, except I have seen several Peter Pan cartoons and stuff. So I know the Peter Pan story really well. And just excited to read, you know, the original book. And yeah, it's kind of hard in a way to really like grasp that, like, you have seen so many Peter Pan things, and like, is this actually where it all comes from? Or did J.M. Barrie or whatever, did he base Peter Pan on other stuff? Like, thank you, babe. Is there actually Peter Pan stuff before J.M. Barrie came up with it? Or is this all original? And if it is, that's like, oh my, Nibbler. That's like, oh my God, you know, Nibbler. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is I'm really excited and hopeful to read this. And yeah, I really want to commend the author for that. If this is all original, which I assume it is, you know, to write something that became such a cultural thing, you know. Peter Pan. I mean, who hasn't seen a Peter Pan cartoon sometime in their life? Thank you, baby. Last of all is Grimm's Tales for Young and Old, the complete stories. So this is a really big book, and I'm not a fan of short stories, but this is kind of different because, you know, well, what do I really need to say? I mean, you should pretty much know about Grimm's Tales. I imagine most people do. But basically, for a lot of stories, you know, this is where a lot of it comes from. So a lot of cartoons you may have seen, a lot of Disney stuff you may have seen, comes either from, thank you, baby, comes from either Grimm's Tales or who's the other one? Is it Hans Christian Andersen? He wrote a lot of stuff as well. I think like The Little Mermaid, I read that. I like that pretty well. And I guess what I'll say is a lot of these original books like The Little Mermaid and stuff and so on, they're a lot darker than the Disney cartoons and stuff. Like for Cinderella, I think the stepsister or whatever they are, like she cuts off her toe to fit her foot into the glass slipper and stuff. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty graphic. That's pretty grotesque. Why didn't that make it into the cartoon? So yeah, there's a lot of darker, grimmer stuff about these original stories. And yeah, so it's just really interesting to actually read those. I don't really know many of these stories at all, and there's a lot of them. So just the vast majority of these I've never heard of before. But it's also going to be interesting finding the ones that are like, oh, you know, this is Cinderella or Snow White or whatever. And yeah, so anyway, I just expect to like this very well. I don't expect to have any problem with it, even if the stories are like, nah, I don't really like the stories too much, whatever, which I don't really anticipate being the case. My conclusion will still probably be, it's Grimm's fairy tales. So like regardless of your interests or regardless of how much you actually like it or not, it's Grimm's fairy tales. So just because of that, the book is kind of automatically a recommended read, regardless of how good the book is or regardless of how much I like it or not. It's Grimm's fairy tales. I mean, it's just a classic. This is where so many cartoons and stuff comes from. So you just got to respect that. So anyway, that is it. Nibbler is getting really rambunctious, so I got to let him out and give him some kisses. Thank you, baby. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully some of these books go good. Hopefully some of them will be my favorite books of all time. We will see. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Nibbler thanks you. And yeah, hopefully it's a good reading year. Hopefully you have a good 2026. Anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Hope to see another video. Hope your 2026 is very good and that you have a very good reading year and that 2026 is good for you and yours. So, thank you guys for watching. Hope to see you in another video. Bye! Thank you, baby.
2, 3, 4.